The site seems to have started with what we call the barn complex towards the south of the site, which consists of 10 post holes in a double row, which would form the base for the large upright timbers which have supported a large barn. The barn itself almost certainly had aisles when it was first constructed, of which we've only got the remains of the north aisle wall foundation, which rather than being a stone wall would have been a timber, so the whole structure would have been one big timber entity. We're not entirely sure of the date that this might have been built. It may extend as far back as the 2nd century, but probably more likely the 3rd century AD. At some stage, probably not too long after they first built it, they added a stone element to the western end, referred to as a bath in the first year, and probably, having reflected upon it and talked to various experts, it is originally a bath addition to this aisled barn. So they added for themselves a bath at the western end, and then later on, as the site developed, it probably changed into a more residential or domestic unit, possibly as a dining room when they added a second bath. Just off the southwest corner of that building was a stone-lined well. This was the well that had the dog nicknamed Brutus in it. This well seems to have been abandoned in the late 3rd century, which may well reflect the point at which the baths at the western end were replaced by the baths to the southeast. The well itself had collapsed quite badly in, with both the eastern and western sides slumping inwards and the stone collapsing down into the base of the well, the dog then being thrown in on top, probably as some sort of thank you offering to the gods. This date, they seem to have added one and possibly 2 extra buildings to the southeast corner of this barn. Probably first was the much larger bath building that we found to the southeast. This had its own well, probably again a replacement of that first one, this time not stone lined but with just hard sand walls. The bath went through 2 at least phases of development, the first phase being a simple rectangular block very similar to the first bath on the western end of the barn. It was then had 2 additions, a room off its northwest corner with a fairly substantial plunge pool in it, and then another room off the eastern side, of which only the foundations remain, so it's very hard to say exactly what it was. In its first phase, there may well have been a plunge pool in the central room. There was certainly the remains of an opsig floor there. This floor then was probably reused as the base for a hypercaust, and the bottom 2 rooms being the heated elements with the plunge pool off the northwest. To the northeast of this building, forming the eastern end of the original timber barn, is a building that I've called the lodge. We're not entirely sure what this was for. Originally I was assuming that this was a residential block. It's possible because of the square stone chalk foundation with stone on top base that we found in the northeastern half of this, that it was in fact a storehouse of some sort, and this base may have been the base for some sort of derrick lifting things up to a first floor, but equally it may have been the base for a stairway going up to a first floor. We found a 3rd set of baths. It was very hard to get a date at this stage on this set of baths. They would appear to be broadly contemporary with the baths at the southeastern corner that were added as a secondary thing to the barn, so possibly into the 4th century again. They consisted of 2 elements, a plunge pool with an attached tessellated pavement, which were probably the changing room and the cold plunge, and then just off to the north of that was a range of heated rooms with a stokehole at the end, which would have formed the warm room and the hot room of the bath complex. And linking the 2 was probably some sort of timber structure, although very little trace was found of that. There was some debate over exactly what relationship there was between this bath complex and the main block on the south range. It seems likely that there are more timber buildings, possibly another big substantial timber barn-like structure running off of this bath, which would have formed a hall which the bath was part of. This can only really be ascertained if we were to investigate the north range more fully. We found a long line of post holes which stretched all the way up to the far northeastern corner of the site where we had other stone buildings. This eastern line of post holes probably formed that side of a large courtyard which the buildings were grouped around. About halfway up that line of post holes was a cluster of much larger post holes again, which would have supported much bigger timbers in what appeared to be a square shape, and this may well have been the entrance to the whole complex.